All right, hello there, Addie. I am super excited about today's lesson because we are going to learn a really fun, short and sweet concept, and it's the opposite of a number. So that's going to be awesome, not only be awesome, but it's going to allow you to simplify some problems that on the surface may seem really difficult. And when you see them or when your friends see them, they're going to be like, whoa, I don't know how to do that problem. But you're going to know how to do it because we are going to simplify these really difficult looking problems. And it's all with the concept of knowing the opposite of a number. So it's going to be super awesome. First of all, as usual, every time I take my dog to the park, the ducks try to bite him. That's what I get for buying a purebred dog. Okay, just had to start off with a little dad joke there. And let's jump right into the concept. Okay, first of all, I'm going to erase some of this that I wrote before. The number 2, if you graph it on a number line, obviously the number 2 is going to be right there. So I graphed it. Bam, easy. Now, what they introduce is this idea of the opposite of. So whenever you see a negative sign here, this is no longer 2, it's negative 2. But they want you to think of it as the opposite of 2. The opposite of 2 is going to be the number that if you added it to 2, the sum is equal to 0. So on a number line, it basically, you jump back and forth across from 0. 0 is the origin, right? And it's sort of like, I don't know, if it were like a mirror, everything on this side is regular and everything on this side is like the upside down world. These are the opposites. Well, actually, no, that's not totally true because you can say, what's the opposite of negative 2? And you're going to go to the regular world and call it 2, right? So I had started out with the number 2 right here, but if I put a negative sign in front of it, now it means the opposite of 2. The opposite of 2 is negative 2, and I would chart it right there. Okay, but now what if you have something like this? Then you're starting with the number negative 2, so I put it there, and this one right here, this negative sign, means the opposite of negative 2. So the opposite of negative 2 is going to be positive 2, and so I would graph it here. And so when you see this, it looks like a double negative, which you're not supposed to do like in English class, but in math class, we do double negatives all the time and triple and quadruple negatives. So it's easier sometimes to think about it instead of as a double negative as the opposite of. So this is now the opposite of 2. There's 2 opposites. The opposite of the opposite is back to the regular 2. So you got to keep track of those kind of things in your mind. So instead of saying the word negative, like negative 2, say the opposite of. Get it? Okay. So one more thing here that it points out in the book, and if you're following along, this is on page 34. So this right here, this number is 2. Here, if we graph this one, it's the opposite of 2. But you could also, what if you have the opposite of 2? Then it would be back to the 2. So it's that. And this would be graphed here. What if you have the opposite of that? So if you had another one like this, then you bounce back from there to there because it's the opposite of this one. Okay, now what if you wanted to do the opposite of this one? Well, you could put another bracket and put another opposite sign, and then you'd have to graph it on the other part of the number line, so it would be back to here. Get it? And with another opposite, you'd be back to here. You would just be jumping back and forth with all those negative signs. Okay, so these turn out to be, I know you're like, wait, what? Okay, so it turns out that this is the same as this. The reason I thought of Pam is because remember that other meme that is like, they're the same picture when she shows 2 things that are very similar. So this is thought of as the same thing as this because this is the opposite of 2, which is here, And this makes it the opposite of 2, which is back to here. So that this expression is the same number as that. Okay, whew, is that complicated enough? Oh, and we already talked about this. The opposite of 2, you would just be bouncing back and forth equal distances from 0 because the sum of a number and its opposite is always 0. All right, so now when we have complicated expressions, we can simplify them to make them less complicated so we can do the problems. For example, we are going to take a look at this problem. I'm looking at that picture of the box and I'm like, why did I put that there when I made this little lesson? Maybe we are unboxing something? I don't know why I put that there. Addie, I don't know. Okay, I'm sure I had some wonderful analogy in my head for why I decided to put that there, and maybe I'll come back to it because I don't know why I did that. All right, for now, let's look at this expression. This is a complicated expression, but we can simplify it with the idea of opposites, okay? So the first thing that we're going to do is look at what are we actually doing in this problem. We're adding 3 different expressions. So this is one expression right here. This is another expression, and this is the third expression. And you can see that in between these 3 expressions, and by that I mean like a number, in between these 3 numbers, there's plus signs. So all we're doing in this problem is we're adding 3 numbers. But what are those numbers? Because those numbers are pretty complicated, especially like that one or this one, right? So what are the numbers? We can simplify them, but we have to kind of simplify each expression or each number at a time. So let's start with this first one. Okay, so it's a 4, but it's the opposite of 4, which is -4, but it's the opposite of the opposite of 4. The opposite of the opposite of 4, as we just learned, is +4. So I'm going to put that in a bracket right there. Okay, let's look at the next expression. Okay, so now all I'm doing is looking at this. Can we simplify that any further? Okay, one thing they want you to think about is if there's no negative sign out here in front of the parentheses, you're basically adding a positive, you're basically adding that. That's another way to show the expression. For now, I'm ignoring these, but this is, because there's not a negative, there's kind of like an assumed positive. So it's just a negative 2. Okay, so I'm going to simplify that to just -2. I don't know if I explained that very well, but it's okay. I'll make it easier in another example. Let's look at this last expression. We have the opposite of 6. And there's brackets out in front, but there's a plus sign in front of those brackets. So it's just the opposite of 6. If we think about that number line, 6 is going to be here, 0. The opposite of 6 is -6. The opposite of -6 is back to +6. So this is a +6, like that. And then I bring down all the plus signs that we're separating these. And now I can think of it as +4 plus a -2 plus a +6. And if we do that sort of in our heads, it's kind of like 4 minus 2 is 2, and then we add 6 to that, and it's 8. So the answer is 8. Okay, let's do another example because these are definitely really complicated. This one looks complicated, but we're basically just adding 5 numbers together. So let's look at this first number. Okay, we're going to simplify within each enclosure. Oh, this is, okay, well, let me start with this first enclosure and I'll get that out of the way. So this is the opposite of a positive 4. The opposite of a positive 4 is negative 4. So we're not going to think of this as a subtraction sign. We're going to think about it, and we're not even going to think about it as a negative sign. We're going to think about it as the opposite of positive 4. So that's how I got the negative 4. Now, this second enclosure goes here. Let me take this out of the problem for just a second. And the reason I'm doing this is because we're also, at the same time that we're doing this, we're thinking about how we're adding 5 different numbers together. This seems like we are subtracting, but we're not going to think about it as subtraction. We're going to think about it as adding a negative number, right? Just like we did in one of the previous lessons. So when we simplify this expression, it's the opposite of negative 5. The opposite of negative 5 is just positive 5. So I'm going to erase all this and make this negative, and make the second number a positive 5. So now we're adding negative 4 plus a positive 5. Okay, the third expression is easy because it's just plus 5. So I'm going to think about it as adding a positive 5. And I'm putting all of these in separate little enclosures here. I need to make this smaller. I hope you can read that. I'm sorry. Okay, so now I've done this one. I'm just going to erase it. The next enclosure, this is getting complicated, isn't it? I'm going to put a plus sign in front of it because the plus signs just go here. And I'm going to think about this as its own enclosure. It's the opposite of negative 3. The opposite of negative 3 is positive 3. So I'm going to put that there. So that's the next number. Okay, I know it might seem like it's too much trouble to go through each one like this, but it has to be done because once you have like the opposite of the opposite of the opposite of 6 or something, it's going to get really complicated, so you got to do it this way. Okay, and then we're going to add just this last number. We don't really have to simplify because it's just plus a negative 6. So that's exactly in the form that I want it, and I'm just going to add it down there. Okay, so now when I look at this, we are just adding all of these different numbers together. And then we just add it algebraically. So we start out at negative 4 on the number line. If we add 5 to that, we're going to be at positive 1. If we add another 5 to that, we're going to be at positive 6. If we add 3 to that, we're going to be at plus 9. And then if we add a negative 6, we're going to be at plus 3 because 9 minus 6 is 3. So that's the answer, is 3. So once you simplify it, that's the hard part of simplifying, and then you just add it algebraically. Okay, let's look at example 7.2. Whew, look at this. This is getting complicated, right? Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is simplify. We're adding all of these numbers together. So I don't love how this is written because we should be adding numbers together all the time, not using subtraction. So I'm going to be thinking about this as plus, and then this is one entire enclosure that we simplify. And then all these other ones are plus signs, right? And I just think of a plus sign there. Okay, so let's start by simplifying this part. The opposite of negative 3 is positive 3. Sweet. Okay, now this middle one. This is probably the most complicated one. So we have a negative 2, the opposite of negative 2. So in here, that's going to be positive 2. The opposite of positive 2 is going to be negative 2. So now when I simplify, I have negative 2 here. and I'm going to separate them by plus signs because I'm adding them all together. There's no subtraction, remember? Okay, now I'm going to add the last number, which is, I'm getting good at this. We start out with -3. The opposite of -3 is going to be +3. So I'm going to put a +3 here. Okay, now I just have 3 numbers that I need to add together. We start out with 3 on the number line. We take away 2, so we're at +1. And now we add 3 to that, so we're at +4. And that's the answer. Did I get that right? And yes, I got that right. Okay, we're almost there. A couple more examples. Example 7.3. Woo. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is think about how we're adding this, we're adding this, we're adding this, but I need to add a positive sign, a plus sign, right? Because there is no subtraction. This is the same as adding that. Okay, so now I have 3 numbers separated by plus signs. Let's start with this first number. The opposite of -4 is +4. Sweet. So when I do these problems, I show my work and I put the new problem down below. This one I can just bring down because that's easy. That's the way that I want it. It's in the form that I want it. This one's complicated. So let's start in the middle, in the nucleus. This is the nucleus, right? We're starting with -6 for our nucleus. The opposite of -6 is going to be +6. The opposite of +6 is going to be a -6. So we are at -6. That all simplifies to that. Now I'm adding 3 easy numbers. 4 plus a -2. That's the same as 4 minus 2, so we're going to do 2. And then we add -6. So 4 plus -2 is 2. 2 minus 6 is -4. Okay, the other thing to do is there's 2 ways you can add problems like this. One is to think about it like the number line, which is what I just did. And you start out with 1, 2, 3, 4, there, zeros here. I start out with 4, then I go -2, so I'm at 2. Then I go -6, so then I'm at -4. I kind of do that in my head. The other way is to add up all the positive numbers together first and all the negative numbers together first. And you'll get the same thing, and you can do that because of the, what's that property? The cumulative? No. What is it? The property of addition? Crap. Okay. Text me because I know you know what I'm talking about and you're probably saying the word right now and you're like, Mom, it's this. It's the blah, blah, blah. And I can't think of it. So you're going to have to text me and tell me the answer to that. Okay, what would happen if we add all the negatives together? -2 plus a -6 is -8. And then we bring down that 4, and so it's just 4 minus 8, and we get -4. We get the same answer because it doesn't matter in what order you add numbers. You get the same answer. All right, let's do the last one. Example 7.4. The first thing I'm going to do is sort of, okay, I'm going to take a step back and say I have this number, I'm adding this number, but it looks like I need to add a plus sign. Then I'm adding this, then I'm adding this, then I'm adding this. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different numbers that I'm adding together. Let's simplify that. Okay, first, I need to, I like to add my plus signs, but I'm going to need a little more space. So I'm going to put a plus sign here, and then this becomes one number. Okay, right there. And then if I move this over, I'm going to add another plus sign, and this becomes one number. Okay, then now I can do it in my head. All right, so let's start with this first number. We have a +4 for the nucleus. The opposite of +4 is -4. Okay, here we have a -5 for the nucleus. The opposite of -5 is a +5. And I'm making this all summing, just all adding it together, no subtraction. What about this one? Easy peasy, I can just bring that down, but I'm gonna make it, I'm actually gonna make it look a little more complicated like that so it stays consistent with all my other numbers. Okay, see what I did there? Now the next expression to simplify is this. We start out with -3 for our nucleus. The opposite of -3 is +3. I don't know why I think about it as a nucleus, but that makes some sense to me because you're starting at the middle and moving outward to find out what the actual number is that you're talking about. Okay, this last one is just plus a -6. So I can just leave it like that. Now, let's add all the positive numbers together first. If I do that, I have +5 plus 5 is 10. Plus 3 is 13. So I have 13. Now I add all my negative numbers together. So I have -4 and a -6. That makes a -10. 13 plus -10 is the same as 13 minus 10, and that makes 3. So see how we did that? Super easy. So we took something that looks complicated and made it easy. And now you are done. Okay, be careful with those opposite of opposites because they can definitely get tricky. Good luck with your homework today. Love you, Addie. Bye.